Hello and welcome to the Voice Global 2020 panel on Voice UI design patterns. I'm Steve Tingiris, the founder and CEO of Dabble Lab, and today I have the great pleasure of moderating our discussion with four incredible thought leaders in the areas of voice first and conversational UI design and development. Our panelists are Arielle, Radin, Milkana, John, Kelvie, and Jan König. And before we jump into it, I'm going to let each of you do a quick introduction so you can tell us your role with your organization, and we will roll into the questions from there. So Arielle, why don't we start with you? We'll go alphabetical.
I saw that coming. So I'm Arielle. I'm the Director of Clinical Research for Gali Health. I'm also a PhD student in psychology, so I come at this from a perspective more from what people need in terms of feeling validated and having empathic conversations. In terms of what I'm doing with our quote-unquote chatbot, I'm trying to think about ways to enable people to feel, who have chronic illnesses, to feel like they're not alone in their disease journey. And so for individuals who have, illnesses like inflammatory bowel disease, where a lot of times the symptoms are pretty stigmatized and embarrassing, it's really nice to have a friendly, kind of like an AI person to speak to, who also understands your illness. So it's kind of thinking through how can we provide emotional support as well as pick up information and data from users to help them in their disease management.
Awesome. Milkana, why don't you follow on?
Milkana Brace, founder and CEO of Jargon. Jargon is a content management system specifically designed for voice applications. And my perspective on the topic is that we work very closely with agencies and brands that are building multimodal applications. So we've seen quite a big spectrum of applications that are designed and being built or have been built and are used across different platforms like Alexa and Google, and also other proprietary platforms.
Great, welcome. And John.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Kelvie. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bespoken. We provide testing, tuning, and monitoring tools for voice experiences. And I guess, I do certainly bring a perspective that is test-centric to how we look at design. Testing is not associated with the most exciting part of application development traditionally, but we really do see how essential it is to building great voice experiences, and even how it ties in closely with the design process. So I think, some of the insight I have is around that. I also, I have some ideas on other aspects of voice design as well.
So John, before we started, Milkana was saying that she has her dogs there next to her. Is your llama around? Like just out of the camera's view?
He's out in the pasture right now.
Okay.
Maybe we can get him in for an appearance later.
Yeah, we'd love that. Jan.
Jan König, one of the founders of Jovo. We are the open source voice layer that allows companies to build voice experiences that work across platforms and devices. For example, with only one code base, you can build voice apps for Alexa, Google Assistant, but also for the web and for mobile apps and even your custom hardware. And we're a tool for professional teams. And so we see a lot of stuff happening at the intersection of design, content management, and development. And lots of stuff that is not just the developer experience that we're focusing on. And so I think it's important to think about the design aspects a lot when building voice experiences.
Well, so we've all had a chance to talk and work together in some cases in the past. So a lot of the thoughts that I had for topics today have come out of things that we've talked about individually or together in the past. But I wanted to kick it off with a question that seems to always come up online, which is when you're designing or planning a voice app or a conversational app, what's harder and or more important? Is it the conversational design, or is it the technical side of it? And Jan, I'm gonna direct that to you first.
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting question. I don't think that there's like anything that like, I don't know, I don't want to see it as a battle between designers and developers and like what is harder. What I've definitely seen is that over the last 3 years that more and more focus is on design now. At the beginning, because it was so developer driven, you could only develop Alexa skills by really knowing how to code. And there's so many platforms now that make that easier, that there's more and more companies that now have teams, cross-functional teams that have designers on there that build and design great experiences. And so I see that there's a lot of focus there. On the other hand, there's a lot of technical limitations still on all of these platforms. And so what we saw at the beginning when they were conversational designers, when they designed their flows, designed the conversational experiences, that a lot of that stuff wasn't possible on the platforms actually. And so I think it's very important from the beginning on to have both designers and developers who understand the platforms work closely together, and not just have something like a designer and then doing like a developer handoff, and then the developer works with it. And so I think, collaboration is very important.
So what about, is there sort of the equivalent of a full stack voice developer role where you've got somebody that really can just cover the gamut, or is this absolutely a team sport?
I mean, full stack, like what does that mean? Does it also mean that
somebody
people
that
are training
one person that can take it like end to end? They can do the UI, UX, do the back end, do everything.
I don't think so, but I also don't believe in full stack development for web or mobile apps. I think it's so important to really focus on what you're good at. And then also, like, we're probably going to talk about this also, like multimodal, like Milkana already said, like multimodal projects. It's not just voice anymore. And so I think, it's really important to think about all the different modalities and channels that the voice experiences can live on.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about that for a minute. So where does voice fit in your opinion? And I'll direct this to you, Milkana. Where do you think voice is right now? And we're kind of familiar with it, I think, from the aspect of like our voice speakers and digital assistants. But where do you see it going from there? And does it include the cross-modal or multimodal, cross-platform, cross-channel kind of experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. Smart speakers were an amazing introduction to voice to the kind of broad population. And now we have over 1/3 of American households that have smart speakers at home. So people are quite familiar with smart speakers. And of course, there's the voice assistant on smartphones that a lot of people use as well. But we definitely see not only a future, but even a present where voice experiences are really multimodal experiences. And we'll see more and more sophisticated applications that have a different experience based on the device you're on and based on the context you're in. So to give you an example, if you are in a public space, maybe you can use voice as a command input or as an interface to input your request or your question. But maybe you don't want to hear the response back over voice. You want to see it displayed in the screen or in some other fashion. So for the same experience when you're at home, maybe you want to have both speech and the visual context. And maybe for that same experience when you're in the car, you don't want to be distracted by the visuals. You just want to have the speech component. So for that same application, for that same interaction between the user and the application, the experience should be different based on where you are and who you are, right? And actually, that's very much the opportunity that Jargon is tackling through our content management system. We're stitching together these various components, various multimodal components, your pre-recorded audio, your pre-recorded video, your images, your static content, as well as your speech component, and figuring out what combination of those components makes sense based on who the user is and what the device and context are.
Really adds a layer of, it really adds a layer of complexity, I think, that in addition to, we've got voice and graphical user interfaces, we also have different formats, right? So we've got screens that can display buttons and, some screens that can't display buttons, or some channels, I suppose, that can't display buttons. Does anybody, and I'm going to put this out there to whoever would like to respond, are there any standards that you're aware of right now, like design patterns, like this is the right way to go at it for this kind of environment? Anybody, like when you look at a mobile app, most mobile apps you can navigate pretty easily, and they've got things like hamburger menus that we're all familiar with. Are there sort of the voice equivalents of those kinds of things that are being developed or starting to emerge?
I mean, I'm happy to take a shot at answering this, to say that I don't know the answer to that. I would be really interested if somebody does. My observation about multimodal that I want to put out there is that I see people just struggling terribly with it. I think it's so tough. We see a lot of apps that are just broken across different form factors. I think people have a hard time even getting their head around what all the form factors are, much less what a really optimal experience is across those devices. And then on top of it, you have people now that are pushing into, and I might be mixing up some of these terms, but like omni-channel stuff, where it's like, okay, let's take a conversational AI and deploy it onto a mobile phone, or let's deploy it onto an IVR system. And so, and it could be strictly voice that you're doing there, but so some combination of, okay, we've got these 10 different display factors we've got to consider, then we've got to consider these different voice channels. I think it's really overwhelming, and sort of synthesizing that and coming up with a unified approach. I mean, just even having some standardized design approaches, I mean, would be amazing and so helpful for people, but to my knowledge, it's not there. And even like, I would say the very sophisticated end of the pool, the people that are spending the most time in voice, it's still pretty nascent.
Yeah, I think the omni-channel or going in and out of band creates some incredible challenges. So imagining that you have a conversation that starts with a smart speaker, but then continues with a mobile device that's SMS enabled or something like that. What you can send in terms of content, Milkana, I know this is a lot of what you guys at Jargon are working on. It becomes a big challenge. On the challenging side, Arielle, I'm going to direct this one at you. What would you say in your day-to-day role, designing the conversational interface for Gali? What would you say is the most challenging part of it?
I think I'm constantly trying to balance these two competing interests of like providing this like very seamless, human-like, empathic conversation with being able to also fulfill requests and collect data. And so on one hand, I think like having something where it's really easy to just like ask a question and get a response back, that's wonderful in certain use cases, but in others, having the bot be able to have like an emotional conversation with the user. So one way that I've been kind of dealing with this is having a bunch of sub agents that basically deal with different types of conversations. So there's that component on the conversational design side, but then also recognizing technical limitations. So when you were talking about like, is there a full stack person? I feel like I've been trying to like kind of at least have an understanding of the tech side, of the development side, because otherwise the types of things that I want to do, if I don't have like a technical understanding of what's actually possible, then I'm just setting myself up for failure every day, or disappointment. So I think that's the most challenging thing for me, is just recognizing what's on the cutting edge, sort of like pushing the boundary a bit, but still maintaining what's technically feasible.
I think this is one of the big expectation misalignments too when it comes to developing conversational apps. There's this expectation that it's AI, you know, it should be like C3PO. It should be able to talk and hold a conversation. But I don't know that we're there yet. Jan, what are your thoughts on the same question? What's the most challenging part of what you guys are trying to provide in terms of helping users to make conversations more natural, or should they be more natural? Should they be, you know, this is a bot and it's better than a web form for certain things, but not as good as a human?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think at the beginning, also because of the marketing, Amazon did for Alexa, for example, at the beginning, there was a lot of focus on conversational experiences, that general AI that can answer any question. And now I think a lot of people also learned that voice just saves a lot of time, and that sometimes it's not important to have like long back and forth conversations, but rather just like getting stuff done. So I think that's important. But sometimes there is like a lot of stuff, like one example is asking a user for their phone number. I read an interesting post by Jas Sweeting that was published, I think, in 2018, where he talks about how difficult conversational systems can be when you compare them to a simple form, something like, okay, what's your phone number? There's so many different ways how a user could answer, and like all of these different things, like, I don't know, like saying something else, or no, I don't want to give you my number, or dictating the wrong number, and all of these different things. It's so challenging if you look at the flow diagrams of like just this one question. And I think there will be lots of challenges until all of these things are solved. We at Jovo, we worked on something with the community that we call conversational components that make stuff like this a little easier. And so these are like pre-packaged conversational modules, as you can call them, that include a language model, content management, and then also the app logic or the dialogue management. So we have one module collecting a user's phone number, for example, and developers can just go in, plug into that module and delegate to that module, and then that's it. And so that these are like 1,000 lines of code, for example, that they don't have to build themselves. And I feel like once we also have something like schedule a meeting and I know a customer survey, these are all things that take a lot of time to build. And I think that people are just not building them because they take a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so hopefully in a few months, years, we will have a proven like library of great user experiences of like small modules that can solve some of these problems.
Yeah, it's deceptively complex, isn't it? You get into these things and you think, oh, you know, how hard can this be? John, I know you can speak to this from the testing side, but one project that John and I were working on, or are working on, I guess, the requirement is to recognize an address, you know, like a postal address. And you can't even imagine how many different ways somebody could say their address. And so it creates an incredible amount of effort to get that right. So having those components, conversational components, would be awesome. On the testing side, John, and we're getting close here on our time, but what are the challenges in testing? How do you really make sure one of these apps, systems, AIs is ready for production, ready for the real world?
Well, I would even broaden it beyond testing just to say that how do you ensure that you're delivering something that's actually understanding users? Because I think we see that as the critical concern and the biggest challenge for voice. And it's twofold. And I think it even goes to that first question you asked, which is more important, you know, the design or the developers. You know, if you don't know what your users are going to ask or how they're going to say it, I think the design is the most important thing. Like I always think like really systematic, rigorous testing is, or I tend to think that's the answer to every problem. But if you're not sure what users are going to say, if you're not sure about how they're going to react to your use case, you've really got to start with that and making sure that you're understanding how they want to talk to you. You know, and you go back to the sort of classic questions question I see agencies posing, which is, what is a conversation with your brand? You know, which I think is a little bit cliched at this point. I've heard that in a number of conferences, but it's absolutely true. You know, you've got to figure that out. You've got to figure out, is your use case relevant? And then how at all will people think to express it in a natural way? Starting with functional testing to getting into more in-depth types of testing around specific concerns around AI. And, you know, you get into how the speech recognition behaves, you get into how the NLU behaves. It sounds really daunting. I think that the way in which we approach it, you know, makes it far more accessible. And overall, you're just trying to make sure that with this sort of, you know, the advent of these conversational systems, that people are really able to have a natural conversation with it, or at least be naturally understood. It's tough, but you know, the upside to it that we see is, you know, there's dramatic improvements that are able to be made if you do, you know, actually focus on it and really try.
Yeah, I think the role and thinking through the role of the app that you're building, or the bot that you're building, and being very, very clear on the value that it provides. I agree 100%. That is someone told me, and I think about this a lot. You know, making a customer happy is really just about exceeding their expectations. But to exceed their expectations, you need to set them first. And the lower the expectations are, the easier it is to exceed them. So bots that that put out an expectation that just can't be achieved, I think, are the ones that are the most frustrating to users generally. We are just about up on time, but before we finish up, I wanted to open it up for a second. Does anybody have any thoughts, words of wisdom? Something that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, I liked what Jan said earlier, that, you know, you're building out libraries to, you know, with these pre-built modules to handle different parts of conversation flow. And what I hope for in 5 years, I mean, this is one thing, is that I think that's what should be part of the core NLUs, and it's not today, unfortunately. So you do need to, you know, use somebody like Jovo for that, or, you know, come up with it yourself. I really would like the day, though, when that sort of NLU behavior is baked in. I think that's an exciting thing. I think it's going to take a bit longer than maybe we initially thought, but once it's there, boy, it's going to make developers' lives a lot easier and users' lives a lot easier.
Arielle, where do you see 5 years from now? What do you hope that's different, or where do you see this all going?
I think for me, like the thing that I really want to have happen for Gali is to have these like extremely personalized conversational flows that are really taking into account what's going on with you as a human being, not just like demographically, but like what's happening with you today. Because I just think about how when I talk to my friends, if they know me really well, it changes the way that we have conversations. And so that's the thing I think is kind of missing right now from the kind of like the voice bots that I interact with. It feels like very standard across whoever's talking to them. So what we're trying to do is to make it extremely personalized. So the Gali that you're talking to is completely dependent on who you are. And so my friend Gali is probably very different from your friend Gali. But there are core personality elements that are maintained across.
Milkana, what do you think? Where do you see us 5 years from now?
Yes, I agree with Arielle. I think that the sophistication of conversations you'll be able to have through with voice assistants and with voice applications are going to be far more personalized and far more sophisticated than they are today. Today, for most applications, whether you're interacting or I'm interacting with them, we get the exact same answer, right? And if you ask a question the first time or the 15th time, you get the exact same answer back. That is a terrible, terrible user experience, as we know. And so, yeah, we personally and as a company, we very much believe that we'll see far more sophisticated experiences that are personalized, that are optimized for who you are, your history with the application, your history with the brand behind it, your personal situation, maybe your physical context. And that's really kind of the promise of conversational design, that it is a seamless experience back and forth. So I do expect that we'll see a lot more of that kind of optimization and personalization in the future. I also think, to kind of comment on one of your earlier questions, I do think that building multimodal applications is a team sport. I do think it takes different talents, and to really build an advanced, sophisticated, seamless, wonderful experience, you do need amazing writers, you do need amazing designers and product thinkers, and you do need amazing developers. And to really take full advantage of the platform, you need the best across these disciplines. It is possible for one person to create an app, but it will be a pretty basic app, right? And there's nothing wrong with it, and it can certainly serve a purpose. But to build something that's truly delightful and truly seamless, I think it is a team sport, and you'll see a lot more professionals develop voice expertise around writing and around design and around development. So I definitely see that as a trend in the industry.
I agree 100% there. Jan, I'll let you close us out. Your final thought for voice in the coming 5 years.
When I listened to all these amazing takes by the others, I got a little nervous, to be honest. There's so much work to do, but also like super exciting. So much work. I mean, when we look at the current state, it's just like what I mentioned, like collecting a phone number, like just on an Alexa device, for example, is already such a challenge. And if we now take into account what we mentioned, like the multimodal stuff, like, I don't know, like it's different, like collecting a phone number on the device with the screen on the phone, like, I don't know, like, or whatever. And if we then also add personalization, like this gets like, I don't know, like a 4-dimensional, like 5-dimensional design challenge. I'm super interested in seeing like where we're going there. And I'm, yeah, super excited, but I think this is going to be important. And of course, software, artificial intelligence is going to solve some of these challenges for us. So we don't have to do all of these things by ourselves. And so, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time the next few years.
I suspect you won't be bored at Jovo.
Hopefully not.
Well, hey, I think that about wraps up the time that we have. I want to thank you all so much for your willingness to participate and sharing your thoughts, and want to thank everybody who's watching. And if you've got questions, comments, you can leave those in the notes, and we will respond just as quickly as we can. Thanks so much.